All right. Well, Sam, 30-minute show, 5 days a week. It's tough to really go in depth and do a real deep dive on baseball every day. And I just feel like because of that, we really haven't given the Minnesota Twins enough attention on this show. So today, as we sit here 5 weeks into the MLB season, I kind of want to peel back the onion, so to speak, and find out just what this ball club is all about. Before we look at it in a broader scope, let's just talk about last night's game real quick. As you mentioned, Dylan Bundy was on the mound against his former team, comes into the game 3-1 despite kind of a rocky start in his last outing. If you sat down on your couch last night and only watched the third and fourth innings in this one, you pretty much got the gist. Bundy gives up 6 in the third. Twins rally right back with 4 of their own with a 2-run bomb from Carlos Correa to give them a little bit of life. But Orioles come right back in the fourth and tack on 3 more. And that was your ball game. Twins lose 9-4 and come back down to earth a little bit after winning 11 of their last 12 games and find themselves in first place in the Central Division. That's all you really need to know about that one. Byron Buxton was not in the lineup. Bundy gets smacked, again, allowing 9 runs in 3 2/3 innings. Looking back, though, Sam, on that wild red-hot streak, before I get into some specifics, I'm wondering what your big takeaways were, some big highlights during that stretch. I mean, teams do get streaky in the MLB, so just how sustainable is this Twins' recent success?
Yeah, you're probably not going to win games at a 11 out of 12 pace, but that you need to have a couple of those during your season to become a ball club that's 20 above 500, right? If you have 2 stretches, 11 out of 12, and then you play 500 the rest of the way, that puts your record at 91 and 71. That's a playoff team right there. So you do that again and then tread water the rest of the way. That's what most teams do. I mean, even the Bomba Squad Twins in 2019, they kind of were propelled by an incredible month of May. And then they had a pretty good September as well. But, other than that, a lot of times in baseball, you have those lulls where you're just trying to stay afloat. You might have injuries. And I think that's important to note here in this Twins run is that they have dealt with injuries and they've overcome it. Like they didn't have Buxton that whole time. They haven't had Kirilloff. They just lost another starting pitcher. So they have dealt with stuff and they've kind of stayed afloat through it. And they haven't even had the best offense either, Luke. I mean, the beginnings of this winning streak, remember, they were winning games 2-1, 1-0, 4-3. They were squeaking by with some late game heroics, but they were not hitting the baseball. Now they're starting to come around a little bit offensively. We're seeing Kepler seeing the ball better. Correa is seeing the ball great right now. Trevor Larnach, the former first-round pick, is hitting really well. So the bats are coming alive, and the pitching, except for Bundy, has stayed pretty strong. And I feel like the bullpen is actually kind of coming into its own as well. That was the weak spot early when they started 4-8. Now the bullpen is getting coming around as well. So everything's kind of clicking right now with the exception of last night. And they've done it without, perfection. They haven't hit perfectly the whole time. They've been hurt and still they're winning baseball games. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I want to touch on that bullpen and just the starting rotation as a whole here in a second. But first, the Twins made a blockbuster move, we know, bringing in Carlos Correa this offseason. A move, really, the Twins are not known for. High expectations coming in, rightfully so. He's batting .264, leads the team with 24 hits right now. When the Twins won the division, looking back, 2018, 2019, Nelson Cruz was that veteran leader in the clubhouse, the guy who would just put that team on his back, so to speak. Then it was supposed to be Josh Donaldson the last 2 seasons. He was supposed to be that guy. Things really didn't pan out, as we know. Correa, though, is now brought in to be the next guy, it seems like. Now, he'll tell you Byron Buxton is the face of the franchise, and certainly I don't think many people are going to argue about that. But Correa, again, from a veteran standpoint, more about that, day-to-day grind, that day-to-day, the process, coming in every day and working your tail off. Do you think he's been what the Twins were hoping he could be, both on the field and off it, bringing this team chemistry together?
Yeah, I think the impact has probably been a little more off the field to this point. He's starting to hit a lot better. He had a really big clutch hit last week toward the end of a game. I think the bat is really going to come around. We're probably going to see 25, 30 home runs from this guy and, close to a 300 average. But his presence is imperative on this team, his voice, because you did lose some veterans. You lost Cruz, you lost Donaldson, and they traded pieces away at last deadline, and they have gotten a little younger, a little more inexperienced. They bring in a guy who has won a World Series, and it was a leader on that Astros team. He's got, he comes from the Buxton draft class. He was pick 1, Buxton was pick 2. He's got that first round pedigree. He's got World Series pedigree. And I think that they need that if they're going to be a postseason ball club and break this hideous, ugly 18-game postseason losing streak. You got to have players like that can sort of carry you in those moments. So I think he's going to exhibit his skills on the field even more as the season goes along, but I think his presence in that clubhouse is pretty imperative right now.
Yeah, I mean, you just talk to those guys in the clubhouse, they say night and day difference from last year, even 2 years ago, to the vibe when you compare it to what they got going on now. Just feels like a different vibe. Stock sign pointing up. Last one here with the Twins. You touched on the pitching rotation. That was always the biggest wild card heading into the season. We knew the front office just, they kind of threw a bunch of names together in a hat, hoped 3 or 4 guys would progress and develop into legitimate contributors. But it's been far from that. I mean, the Twins own the number 1 ERA in all of baseball and have gotten quality outings from a handful of guys this first 5 weeks. Specifically, we know about Joe Ryan. He's turned into the team's number 1 ace. And the bullpen, they're doing a good job of mixing and matching the right guys at the right time, seeming to be getting by with what they have without that one dominant reliever right now. What's your overall impressions of the Twins pitching staff through this first stretch? And, what's the long-term forecast as we get into the thick of the summer?
Yeah, I said this on a previous show. It is believable that they would regress at some point. We're seeing that with Bundy. That was probably never going to last all season, his early success. And you could kind of say the same thing, too, about someone like Chris Paddack. Chris Paddack has that kind of number 3, number 4 starter status. He's had an ERA around 4. In his career. He's at 3.15 right now. That might dive down a little bit. It's those young pitchers that we don't know. How can they, will teams get a scouting report on Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober? How are those guys going to hold up once they get pitching 150 innings? Will the arms, stay healthy? Will their stuff change as the season goes on, as they get a little more fatigued and teams kind of get the book on them? That's probably more my concern. I think that Chris Archer and Paddack and Sonny Gray, if he gets back healthy, they're going to give you a professional approach every game. You kind of know what you're going to get. It's not spectacular, but it's not terrible either. I think Joe Ryan has potential to be spectacular, but we don't know over the course of a full season how it's going to go. Same with Bailey Ober. So how are those young arms going to fare once we get into the dog days of this season? I think that's going to dictate how successful this rotation is.
Yeah, Chris Archer on the mound tonight versus the Orioles. First pitch at 6:05 p.m. Central Standard Time. Twins looking to take the series 3-1, stay atop of the Central Division.